Welcome into Candlestick Chronicles, a 49ers podcast on the Blue Wire Podcast Network. I'm Kyle Madsen. I write about the 49ers over at NinersWire.com, part of the USA Today Sports Media Group. Not solo today. Chris is back. Not back. Currently a resident of Minnesota, of Minneapolis, Minnesota. Hey, man.
Hey, man. They're got to Minneapolis today, and they're...
Minneapolis? Did you just say Minneapolis? Minneapolis?
In Minneapolis, Minnesota today. As I arrive at my undisclosed location in downtown, there are a lot of people walking around, and talk to my Lyft driver, and he's like, and I asked him if this was like unseasonably warm. He's like, oh yeah, this is like summertime. And it's beautiful out. The sun's shining. And apparently it's cold in Minnesota. Who would have thought during the wintertime? But they're celebrating like it's summer, and it's 47 degrees. So shout out to the people here in Minnesota who really go through it in the winters and get a chance to celebrate 47 degree weather.
When it's 47 here, I'm like, I might not go outside today.
It's hoodie and jacket weather.
But do you know why I do go outside when it's 47, Chris? Because I have a Lamb Chops hoodie on. And our friends at Lamb Chops are the official clothing brand of Candlestick Chronicles. I don't want to give anything away, but there's a per source, a well-placed source, a league source. There may be merch coming.
Might be merch coming. We've that's may or may not be in the works. Cannot confirm nor deny. I actually had a new Lamb Chops hoodie delivered to my house today.
Oh, the irony!
While I'm away, but I love my ash gray hoodie so much that I got another one. Only I got black on black. Because if you ever seen me dress, you know I do wear a lot of black. So excited to add that to the repertoire, of course, because it's super comfortable. The fit is perfect. It's warm. It's cozy. It's everything you could possibly want in a hoodie. So my first one was so good, I had to get a second.
Take our word for it, but also try it for yourself. Go to sglambchops.com, grab a hoodie, use promo code Candlestick20 when you check out, and get 20% off that hoodie. Or shorts, or sweatpants, or t-shirt, whatever you're feeling, Lamb Chops has got it for you. It's going to be high quality, it's going to be comfortable, and you're going to look dope too, which is the most important thing. Promo code Candlestick20 at sglambchops.com. Join the herd today. We're also sponsored by Cooperage Brewing, the maker of Candlestick Chronicles Hazy IPA. You can get some at cooperagebrewing.com. I actually think they're sold out at the moment, but never fear, because every single beer they make is delicious. Get yourself a case of something that looks good. Maybe you can't decide. Maybe you're like, man, Kyle, a bunch of these look good. You say they're all delicious. I don't want just one. That's great. You can get a mix and match case. You can get 6 different 4-packs, and they'll send it right to your front door. If you're 21 and over and in the state of California, the best way to acquire beer, you sign for it, and you got 24 beers in your fridge. It's the best. And it all tastes good.
They have a little bit of everything. Obviously, we love them for the Candlestick Chronicles Hazy IPA, which might not be coming out until next football season or potentially the start of training camp. We will see.
Stay locked in to find out.
But they have a double dry hopped Keg Slayer 4-pack that you can get right now, or a case. They have the Kurt Pale Ale, which I've actually seen at Oracle Park, where the Giants of San Francisco play some baseball now and again. They have Dollar Pills, y'all. The Copper Clocks California Common 4-pack. That sounds interesting. A California Common Brew with John Aaron's. I don't know what that is. It's something. We will find out and get back to you guys. They have the Granddaddy Terp West Coast Double IPA, the Succulent Fantasy Hazy Double IPA 4-pack. It's all delicious. It's your favorite brewer's favorite brewery. And we cannot thank Cooperage enough for their partnership over the years, and the beer stands up to anything. So absolutely. Shout out to Cooperage.
Get yours, cooperagebrewing.com, or visit the brewery in Santa Rosa. Great beer, great vibes, and always a great food truck out there as well. We love Cooperage, and we know you will too. All right, let's talk about an array of 49ers things. Let's dive in. All right, the first thing I want to get to, Chris, because I promised the people this in a solo podcast earlier this week, I talked about Jauan Jennings, and I just kind of laid out the options of, they can non-tender him, all the different tender options, or there's the extension option, which John Lynch at the NFL Combine, when he spoke, said that that's kind of the route they would want to go. But if they have to do the restricted free agent tender thing, they will. They want to keep Jauan Jennings around. That makes a ton of sense, especially when you kind of take a deep look at their receiver depth chart. Outside of Deebo Samuel and Brandon Aiyuk, there's not a lot there unless you're super high on Ronnie Bell, which I think he's still TBD, given how light his role was in his rookie year. However, and this is what I want to run by you, I can't quite put my finger on where I'd value Jauan Jennings in like the wide receiver contract scale, because the 49ers can't really break the bank for a third receiver, and I don't necessarily think Jennings is going to go get 12 or 15 million a year or anything crazy like that. But I don't think it's absurd if he goes and wants something like the 3-year, $24 million range.
Yeah, I would agree. And look, when you look at the cap spike, I guess we can call it a cap spike. The cap increasing,
the biggest one ever.
Yeah, the cap increasing by 30 million this offseason. One of the first places you go to, obviously, is Brandon Aiyuk and what that could potentially mean for him. But for me, I think the next place you go to is along the margins, and to me, Jauan Jennings is on the margins, right? Like that is a move. He's not a star player, but he's a very valuable player, which he proved to be in the Super Bowl. And that's somebody that I could, on the open market, like what Kendrick Bourne get? He got 3 years and 24 from New England. Am I making that up?
Let me confirm that. I didn't have it ready. I'll have it momentarily. Continue your point.
But typically, like that's a lot. What Kendrick Bourne got is kind of what I think Jauan Jennings would get if he were to reach the open market.
He got 3 and 15.
Oh, so okay.
With 5.25 guaranteed.
So say with the inflation of the new cap, the equivalent of that is 3 and 23, 3 and 24, something like that.
Yeah.
I kind of think that's worth it to the 49ers because I think his value is apparent both, I mean, for a lot of different reasons, but in the running game, he's a hellacious blocker, right? Like he embodies the toughness and the tenacity that they want to have as an offense. He's a really, really good secondary weapon. And I don't mean secondary weapon in terms of like somebody who's the number 2 option. I mean secondary weapon when defenses are focused on Brandon Aiyuk, Deebo Samuel, Christian McCaffrey, and George Kittle. Right. And that's probably why Jauan Jennings had such a big game in the Super Bowl. Right. So to me, in any given day, Jauan Jennings could lead the 49ers in targets or catches. Because defenses are so worried about the other skill guys. And given how good of a blocker he is in the running game, I think that just makes him a really well-rounded, valuable player. And, that's probably worth cashing out somebody like that for $8 million a year. Right. Yeah. Like I don't think that's unreasonable in a world where the salary cap is going up by 30 million. So that's one of the things that changes. Like when the cap goes up that much, you start to think, okay, maybe they can retain a guy like that on an extension beyond just tendering him. So I think bringing back Jauan Jennings makes a lot of sense. And look, beyond 2024, and we've talked about this, like Deebo Samuel's really expensive now. I think Brandon Aiyuk's probably going to re-sign or sign an extension with the 49ers this offseason. That shrinks his cap number from his 5th-year option from 14 to something smaller, right? He might, instead of a $14 million cap hit with the new extension, he might be around 5 or 6 million. But when you start to talk about 2025 and Deebo Samuel approaching the last year of his extension and Brandon Aiyuk's new money kicking in, you might feel a lot better if you have to trade Deebo Samuel if you already have Jauan Jennings in tow.
That's a great point.
Right.
Yeah.
So what the 49ers typically like to do is everything is within a 3-year plan. So bringing back Jauan Jennings on an extension that falls into the 3-year plan in the sense of we might not have Brandon Aiyuk and Deebo Samuel within those 3 years. So we'd feel a hell of a lot better having Jauan Jennings as our potential number 2 receiver while we replenish the wide receiving room if we have to lose one of those high price guys.
Yeah.
So that to me is why bringing back Jennings makes a ton of sense for the 49ers.
Yeah. And I feel like he's a tone setter for them in a way that they don't really have down the receiving core.
Absolutely. He's unafraid.
Really good player. Yeah. Yeah.
He's just unafraid. He's not going to be a dude that, I mean, maybe if he went to a team where he was like the number 1 or number 2 option, he's not going to be a 1,000-yard receiver.
No,
but he's going to be somebody who will make 10 super important catches throughout a year and then block his face off throughout the season. So,
no doubt.
I'm in on the idea.
So let's stick with the receiving room. And John Lynch at the Combine also said that Brandon Aiyuk is a player, one of his favorite players in the building, and he's the kind of player that they want to keep around, et cetera, et cetera. It's really the DeForest Buckner trade has scarred everyone, it feels like. Because every time the Niners are like, yeah, we like a player, people are like, yo, they liked Buckner. And I think it's just I'm pretty sure we've talked about this before, how different those situations are. But I really do think that the 49ers, unless Brandon Aiyuk wants, Tyreek Hill money or top 3 wide receiver money, I really think the 49ers are going to do everything they can to try and keep him in the building. And I'm very much taking what John Lynch said at face value there.
Yeah. As an aside, it is funny that as scarring as the Buckner trade might be, the Buckner trade is ultimately what allowed the 49ers to draft Brandon Aiyuk in the first place. In essence, partially. Because they get
back.
They get the pick. What was it? 13 from the Colts.
Yeah.
And then move back one spot, get some day 3 picks, use those day 3 picks to trade up back in round 1 with their second pick, and then move up to get Aiyuk. They jump the Packers.
Yeah.
Right. So as scarring as the Buckner trade ended up being, it did land them Brandon Aiyuk, which I think in a 1-for-1 is not a terrible outcome for the 49ers. But that aside, it's different because the 49ers had other guys to sign. This isn't Brandon Aiyuk or other free agents. This is just ensuring that you keep one of your core young guys around for a while. And I'm expecting a deal to get done this offseason. I know other people have talked about, well, he could just play out his 5th-year option, hit free agency. No, he was eligible for an extension before, after his 3rd season. He was eligible for an extension last offseason. So he already did the thing where it was, no, I'm going to take a leap of faith and play without long-term security, entering, the 4th year of his rookie contract, after the 49ers did pick up his 5th-year option.
Yeah, he bet on himself and won.
He bet on himself and won for sure. And he's not going to do that again. That's what last year was.
He's not going to double down?
No, he's not going to do that again because if he did, he would need to have, an 1,800-yard season for it to really make sense for him to do that.
Right.
I'm expecting this deal to get done. I think it could look a lot like the Nick Bosa, Deebo Samuel, George Kittle situations where it got kind of tenuous and negotiations got heated and he missed time during the offseason program. And, there were reports coming out after the fact that, there were certain sticking points in the contract that were really important. That stuff happens and it's dramatic and it's stressful for both sides. And it could linger into the season. Like Nick Bosa's talked about when, he held out in his training camp before he signed his new deal and ultimately didn't have as productive of a season from a sack perspective as he did in years past. But the 49ers are good at getting these deals done. They're really difficult to get done. It's probably the most stressful part of the job for Parag Marathe and Jed York and John Lynch, in the sense that you have a guy, a known quantity who you want to keep in the building, and it's going to be really difficult from a financial perspective to make everything work. But Brandon Aiyuk is the type of player, and he plays a position that makes it worth it to get that deal done with him. Not to mention his value to Brock Purdy.
Yeah.
Right. That's Brock Purdy's guy. Aiyuk likes Purdy. It's, if your organizational bet is entirely hinged on Brock Purdy's development, you
Mhm.
keep Brandon Aiyuk around.
Yes. That's it, man. And that's where I'm gonna bring up the Buckner thing a lot because it continues to get brought up every time the 49ers have a player eligible for an extension. Even though they've only done that once and they've extended everybody else.
Mhm.
But that's such a key point here because Deebo Samuel, as good as he's also been, I don't want to say necessarily injury prone, but his play style could lead to injury.
Injury susceptible, injury
Yeah.
susceptibility.
Yeah. You have George Kittle who's turning 31 this year. You have Christian McCaffrey who turns 29 this year. Is that right?
No, I don't think he's that old.
28? Maybe he turns 28 this year.
We'll look it up. Keep talking.
Either way, you need a young offensive core that's going to grow with Brock Purdy. And I think the 49ers looked at defensive tackle and went, okay, well, that's a position that we can pretty easily replicate, or at least get 70% of what DeForest Buckner was doing and then make up for the pass rush that you might lose with edge play or with Eric Armstead or whatever it is. Like they thought, I think it might have been a miscalculation, but I thought they could relatively easily make up for DeForest Buckner's absence. And I mean, you could kind of make the argument that they have, but with Brandon Aiyuk, he is so damn good that I don't think you can make the argument that, oh yeah, just go draft a receiver in the first round this year and you'll be totally fine. I don't think that you can comfortably say that while also getting ready to potentially pay Brock Purdy upwards of $40 million.
Yeah, I think you pay Brandon Ayuk now, banking that he's going to help you continue to develop Brock Purdy, also with the understanding that you're probably not going to have Deebo Samuel, George Kittle,
Mm-hmm.
and Eric Armstead forever. And you like the next core, the next young wave of key players. Brandon Ayuk is a prominent member of that group.
Mm-hmm.
So you just have to do that. I would say though, based on what you read and what you hear about this receiving class, the guys expected to go, I don't know, it's what, 3 or 4 of them in the top half of the first round are very, very, very highly thought of.
Mm-hmm.
Like Jamar Chase level, like could come in and just ball right away.
Yeah.
And if I'm the 49ers and someone does offer, I don't know, a top 15 pick and you have an opportunity to get one of those guys,
Mm-hmm.
then I do seriously consider the trade, because if you could approximate Brandon Ayuk's, if you can get 70% of Brandon Ayuk on a rookie contract and not have to pay him $25 million a year, then I would seriously consider that. But the other side of that coin is, if you have a top 15 pick and you could draft one of those receivers, why on earth would you trade for Brandon Ayuk and then have to pay him $25 million? Unless you just really, really wanted a veteran who had experience as opposed to one of these young guys.
Yeah.
So I don't know that I think the 49ers asking price would be super high. And if it was just one pick, it would be, or if the package was centered around one pick, it would be a top 12, top 15 pick.
Right.
At which point, I don't see a team offering the 49ers that, because they would just say, well, why would we go trade for a veteran wide receiver and pay him when we can get somebody who might be more talented in the long run who's on a rookie contract now?
Right.
So I don't think that it doesn't seem like, as of February 29th, that there's an obvious trade that makes sense for the 49ers that allows them to remain as talented in the short term,
Mm-hmm.
sending Brandon Ayuk somewhere else. Because I think that the only reason you do it is if you can get one of these stud receivers, and then you're just like, yeah, this guy's going to start, and we feel like it's a wash from a production standpoint, and we're just going to be younger and cheaper for a little bit longer.
Mm-hmm.
But I don't see the 49ers getting that trade, because if you have one of those picks, why would you do that? Like, why would you go get a veteran that's going to be expensive when you could just have one of these cheap young guys?
It doesn't make sense. Can I bitch about the combine for 1 second?
Oh, sure, dude. That's like my favorite pastime.
Okay. Not bitch about the combine. I just I can't believe that in 2024, the combine from a draft prospect perspective is anything more than just marveling at the peak of human athleticism.
Yeah.
Like Chop Robinson, this defensive end from Penn State, who Mel Kiper mocked to the 49ers at number 31 in his second mock draft, ran a 4.49 40.
Wow.
And he is only the second player, I'm sorry, and this is according to Rich Eisen, second player in the last 20 combines to run sub 4.5 and broad jump at least 10 and a half feet after weighing in at 250 plus, which is just bananas. The only other player to do that in the last 20 combines is Vernon Davis, by the way. But that's amazing, but can he play football? And it's unbelievable that year in and year out, we get caught up in, wow, look at how high this guy jumped. Look how fast this guy ran, et cetera, and just kind of overlooking whether he can actually play football. Like, man, he helped his draft stock with that workout. Like, why? Like, teams that have watched him are all of a sudden like, oh, wait, he is fast.
Yeah. I don't know. Here's my issue with the combine, because I think the way it gets consumed is that it's the football viewing audience's introduction to a lot of these players, right? Like, unless you're like locked in to college football and the draft stuff during the season, this is like the introduction to this draft class for a lot of people. But it's not the introduction to this draft class to NFL teams, right? Like the NFL has been studying just about everybody in this draft class going on like 2 years now. Like as soon as the draft is done, personnel departments start compiling their scouting reports on next year's class, right? Like after the draft is done in April, it's in April this year, right?
Yes.
Draft.
End of April.
After the draft is done, the Niners personnel department is going to huddle together and then compile what they have on the 2025 class. So for somebody to have a crazy workout and to the idea that, oh, that's really going to improve this player's stock and change the way teams think about it.
Yeah.
I just think the combine does a disservice to how much work goes on behind the scenes well before the combine.
Yeah.
Right? Like this is essentially a job fair to where teams meet with these players and they say, hey, we've been watching you for 2 years. Please, if you work out, please confirm what we've seen on tape.
Right.
Or, if you're slower or not as strong, like, why is that? Like, really the most important part about the combine really is the medical stuff.
Yeah.
Is everyone doing the medical examinations, teams gathering the latest medical information on everybody that's eligible or that's at the combine. Like that is really the most important thing, because to just assume that, the first time an NFL team lays its eyes on a prospect is at the combine because he ran fast.
Yeah.
Just completely ignores all the work that's been done beforehand, because you have area scouts who are in rental cars and driving from practice to practice, 350 days a year, talking to strength coaches, talking to assistant coaches, talking to guidance counselors, learning everything they possibly can about these guys, where they get to the combine and it's just sort of a consolidation of information. Like it's just an opportunity to kind of see everybody in one spot. And just sort of confirm what you already know, or if there are changes, figure out why those changes are happening in terms of how well or how poorly they're working out.
Yeah, the draft process for teams doesn't follow the same calendar as draft content on the internet.
Exactly.
It's very much not the case. I will say though, if there's some fringe, like I think the real movement for players at the combine is not necessarily, I'll stick with Chop Robinson, the defensive end from Penn State, because we're already here. I don't think that he's all of a sudden going to be a top 10 pick because he ran super fast and jumped really, really far. I think he's going to go But if you're a receiver who is maybe a fringe day 2 guy, late day 2, early day 3 guy, and you run like hell and you jump super high, that might push you up into the end of day 2, where a team is more like, oh, we really like his athleticism. That didn't necessarily stick out on tape, but we like the idea. And you maybe move up that way. That's where I think the actual movement happens. But we
Yeah.
get so focused on the first round guys because they're the guys that most people know.
Or there's the opposite that happens, like DK Metcalf. Right. He runs like a completely absurd 40 time, like looks like he's made by, Marvel Comics, and then, slides down
Can't
to
move sideways.
then he moves to the back end of the second round.
Yeah.
So I think it can cut both ways. I also think like technology overall has really impacted the combine negatively from the standpoint of like all these schools have tracking data now.
Yes.
So like like NFL teams can actually get tracking data reports on these players because they have the same sensors in their uniforms that NFL players have. And instead of being like, oh, he plays fast on tape, they actually get numbers and say, oh, this guy was running 22 miles an hour on his 70-yard touchdown that he scored. He's fast. Right. And you don't need to see him. You don't need to see him run a 40-yard dash at the combine to confirm that he's fast because you already have that tracking data.
There's Dre Greenlaw.
Right. Exactly. So it's not. I just find like, and again, I'm not super locked into the combine right now for other work reasons, like following the Sacramento Kings around. But I just think it's, yeah, I just think it's like, it's just funny that like, oh, this guy ran. He's going to go in the first round. That's a first round time. It's like these opinions have, these opinions have been formed about this player well before he ran a 1/10 of a second faster than expected. Right?
Yeah,
like people know how fast this dude is, or whether he was dealing with an injury and now he's healthy or whatever. Like the combine is another checkpoint in gathering information, but it's not the checkpoint that I think a lot of people have made it out to be.
No doubt. That's a good place to stop for today. Appreciate everybody for checking us out on YouTube at youtube.com/@Candlestick Chronicles podcast, or just search Candlestick Chronicles on YouTube. We're also on Twitter at CandleCron. That's CandleCron, no stick, no ickles. And of course, wherever you get your podcasts, we're going to be taking you through the offseason as the 49ers try and gear up to make another Super Bowl run. That's it. That's all we got. We'll talk to you guys next
Subscribe,
time.
notification bell, like buttons, all those things.
Yeah, I knew I was missing something. Good Lord.
We got to do the fancy like JT O'Sullivan animations, like mid video, like subscribe, click here with like the little moving words and all that. That'd be fun.
We'll get the interns on that.
Yeah, for sure.
All right. Goodbye, everybody.
All right. Yeah.